COVID exposed to us that our country has lost its economic independence. We now depend on other countries for our survival, for basics. We've lost our manufacturing sector because of shoddy governance from the Labor Liberal National Party for almost 8 decades, since 1944. And in Australia, I will be discussing the cost of shoddy science that is crippling people, crippling families, communities and our nation. One Nation has repeatedly called for and continues to call for an independent Office of Scientific Integrity and Quality Assurance to assess the science claimed to be underpinning government policy and decisions. We want objective, independent scientific scrutiny that is protected from politicisation. Science is not a label. It is hard, verifiable, reliable data within a logical framework that proves cause and effect. Within a framework that proves cause and effect logically. It's every senator's responsibility to ensure that she or he makes decisions using such data. I'll give you some examples of the cost of shoddy science that has not been scrutinised. Climate policies and renewable subsidies cost Australian households via electricity costs $13 billion per year every year. That's $1,300 per household per year. Needlessly wasted. Median income in this country is $49,000. After tax, that's around about 34, maybe a little bit higher. How the hell can anyone on $39,000 after tax afford $1,300 just being flushed down the toilet for nothing? The additional cost of climate policies on our power bills is a staggering 39%. Not the 6.5% that the government claims. Renewables distort the low-cost coal-based power and more than double the wholesale electricity price from coal's $45.50 per kilowatt hour to $92.50. China and India use our coal to sell electricity at 8 cents a kilowatt hour, while we burn the same coal without transporting it thousands of kilometres, and the price of electricity from that coal is 3 times as much at 25 cents a kilowatt hour. All Australians have a right to benefit from our rich natural resources. The true cost of electricity in this country would be $13 billion per year less if cheap, affordable, reliable coal production was not lumbered with policies that distort the market. We commissioned independent expert and respected economist Dr. Alan Moran to get those figures, to calculate those figures, and he used the government's own data, so it can't be sensibly refuted. The government stopped presenting it in consolidated form to hide what government policy is doing to everyday Australians in our nation. Every subsidised green energy job, so-called renewable job, from renewable or unreliable power, wind and solar, everyone costs 2.2 jobs lost in the real economy. Parasitic unreliables are killing its host, the people of Australia and the people of Queensland. We go further beyond raw data on energy costs to look at property rights. Property rights have been stolen in this country in the name of the Kyoto Protocol. John Howard started it, his Howard Anderson government started it with Rob Borbidge's National Party government in Queensland, then followed quickly by Peter Beattie's government and every government since, with the exception of Campbell Newman, who failed to repeal it. But the property rights have been stolen with no compensation. That is fundamentally wrong. We see water policy with corruption in the Murray-Darling Basin when it comes to water trading. We see the stealing of water rights, all based on shoddy science. The whole Murray-Darling Basin plan is based on shoddy science, political science. Instead of having science-based policy, we now have policy-based science, and both sides of this parliament are responsible. Senator Carr, who I have a lot of regard for in many ways, raised COVID. We have not been given the scientific data on COVID. We've been given models. The scientific data, which I got from the Chief Medical Officer, points to a completely different picture, completely different management. COVID is being mismanaged in the name of science. It is wrong. Now, what we want to turn to now, the costs, by the way, of all of those examples I've given are not in the billions, but in the tens and hundreds of billions. And the impact on our country's economy is in the trillions. The lost opportunity, the lack of competitiveness. COVID exposed to us that our country has lost its economic independence. We now depend on other countries for our survival, for basics. We've lost our manufacturing sector because of shoddy governance from the Labor Liberal National Party for almost 8 decades, since 1944. And in the last 18 months, we've seen Liberal and Labor and National squabbling at state and federal level because there is no science being used to drive the plan. There's no plan for COVID management. Each state is lurching from crisis to crisis, manufactured crisis to manufactured crisis, and the federal government is bypassing the Constitution and conditioning them to suck on the federal tit. That's what's going on. Let's have a look at the science. I have held the CSIRO accountable. 3 presentations from them, plus Senate estimates. The CSIRO has admitted, under my cross-examination, that the CSIRO has never said that carbon dioxide from human activity is a danger. Never. We asked them, who has said it? Because politicians tell us you said it. They said you'll have to ask the politicians. Secondly, the CSIRO has admitted that today's temperatures are not unprecedented. I'll say that again, not unprecedented. They've happened before in recent times without our burning of hydrocarbon fuels. Thirdly, the CSIRO then fell back on one thing, one paper, after almost 50 years of research, and said that the rate of warming is now increasing. That too was falsified by the author of that paper. It was then falsified and contradicted by other references which the CSIRO had to then give us. There is no evidence for the CSIRO's sole claim that rate of temperature rise is unprecedented. Its own papers that it cites do not show that. The CSIRO then relied upon unvalidated computer models that are already proven to be giving erroneous projections. And that's what the UN IPCC relies on. They've already been proven wrong many times. The clincher is that to have policy based upon science, you would need to quantify the amount of impact on climate variables such as weather, rainfall, storm activity, severity, frequency, drought. You'd need to be able to quantify the impact of carbon dioxide on that from human activity. The CSIRO has never quantified any specific impact on climate or any climate variable from human carbon dioxide. The CSIRO has repeatedly with us relied on discredited and poor quality papers on temperature and carbon dioxide. It gave us one of each. And then when we tore it to shreds, they gave us more. We tore them to shreds. It has never given us any good quality papers, scientific papers. That's their science. CSIRO revealed little understanding of the papers they cited as evidence. That's our scientific body in this country. They could not show understanding of the papers that they cited. The CSIRO admits it has never done due diligence on reports and data that it cites as evidence. Just accepts peer review. What a lot of rubbish that is. That's been shown in peer-reviewed articles to be rubbish. The CSIRO allows politicians to misrepresent CSIRO without correction. It doesn't stand up, doesn't have any backbone. The CSIRO has misled Parliament. Independent international scientists have verified our conclusions with the CSIRO science, and they're stunned. People like John Christie, Nurse Shaviv, Niels Morner, David Leggett, Ian Plimer, Will Happer. There is no climate emergency. None at all. Everything is normal, completely cyclical weather. Now we'll move to the UK's Parliamentary Office of Science and Technology. That's turned into a propaganda outfit and a mouthpiece and cheer squad for global policies. Politics has captured it and turned it into a massive bureaucracy that writes legislation, not checks legislation. Post, as it's called, is composed of people as Senator Carr said, consistent with parliamentary composition. That tells us straight away it's not independent. Instead of a body to drive legislation, we want a body to vet it. Senator Carr mentioned the Office of Chief Scientist. I asked the Chief Scientist for a presentation on his evidence of climate change caused by human carbon dioxide. After 20 minutes of rubbish, we asked him questions and he looked at us and said that he's not a climate scientist and he doesn't understand it. Yet we have policies around this country based upon Dr. Finkel's advice. That's the state. Those policies that I mentioned, some of them are based on his advice. We've had activists such as Tim Flannery, David Caroli, Will Steffen, Ross Garnaut, Ove Goldberg, Matthew England, Kurt Lambach, Andy Pittman, Leslie Hughes, being paraded by the governments, both Liberal and Labor, paid by the government, and yet they're nothing more than academic activists. None have provided any empirical scientific evidence in a logical framework proving cause and effect. That's what parades around this parliament for decades now as science. It's rubbish. That's why One Nation opposes this motion. It is wasting committee resources to send them off on a goose chase to adopt something like the UK's Parliamentary Office of Science and Technology. We invite Senator Carr to join us in legislating an independent body of scientists to scrutinise government policy and decisions, to scrutinise them. Let the government put up the science upon which its policies are based and let the independent body scrutinise it. That requires a few things. First of all, it needs a team funded and set up to be opposing the government's position. And let them both go at it. Science fundamentally is about data and about debate. We need the government to put up its science and let a team tear it apart and be funded to tear it apart. Once that happens, then the science is dismissed. That saved the country billions of dollars. If it withstands the scrutiny, that's good. We know we've got a really solid scientific case. The other way is to have a transparency portal. Put the science out there and let anybody in the public domain tear it apart. And if someone finds a chink, fix it. Because scientists, true scientists, are not about protecting their egos, they're about being open to the advancement of humanity. And so they welcome their own science being torn apart. We need an independent view. The type of information, as the motion discusses, is simple. All we need is empirical scientific evidence in a framework proving cause and effect. We then need independent scrutiny, and I've given you just two examples. That will replace policies that, as Senator Carr has discussed, and I agree with him, are based on ideology, headline seeking, prejudice, opinions, looking after vested interests, looking after donors. This is what's driving this country, and the people are paying for it. They're paying for it through the neck, and we're destroying our country. We need the claimed science to be scrutinised and verified and rejected. What a shameful, disgraceful incident we saw in this parliament just after midday today. We saw Senator Wong, we saw Senator Watt, we saw Senator Waters engaging in a screaming match. Not once did anyone raise empirical scientific evidence. This is day 701 since I've asked the chief proponent in this parliament for this climate change nonsense to be accountable for her data. I've asked Senator Waters, I challenged her 701 days ago, almost 2 years ago. I challenged her 11 years ago. She has never agreed to debate me. She refuses to debate me. She refuses to put up the scientific evidence. She refuses to discuss the corruption of climate science. And yet she espouses policies that will gut this country. But we've also seen Senator Wong quoting a report from the IPCC. That's not a report from scientists, that's a report from political activists. And then she talks about what we are told, insert the catastrophe, will happen in the future. That's not science. What we need is an honest debate. We need We need an honest debate to reveal the pure science and to hold people accountable in this parliament. We will not be supporting this motion because it will encourage politicisation.